Revenge sparks in the night, a father's whisper in the phantom light.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the PEAL SIG, English Australia PEAL SIG first session for the year. We'll get started now. It's great. We can see we've got 61 participants so far, expecting a few more to come in as we get started. So let's jump into it. So once again, welcome. My name is Catherine Alston and I'm the Director of the Centre for English Teaching and Head of the Learning Hub here at the University of Sydney. I'm also the SIG convener for our post-entry English and academic language SIG. I'm here today joined by our SIG deputy conveners, Sue, James and John, and you'll get to hear from them throughout the session today. I'd also like to acknowledge all the support, the emotional and logistical support that we receive from English Australia with Sophie O'Keefe, and she's on the call today too. So an overview of our activities for this year. We've decided to have a dual focus. So when you look at the sessions planned, you can see we'll be focusing on AI and the impact on practitioners and practice, and then also on professional development and looking at a framework for continuing professional development for PEAL practitioners. All of our sessions, bar one, will be webinars like this one. And then for the English Australia conference in September, we'll be running a face-to-face session for conference participants. And we look forward to seeing you all, as many as you can, at some of these sessions throughout the year. So to jump into today's session, AI policy and practice, cross-institutional perspectives on what we're doing, where we're going, and what it may mean for us as practitioners. We're very, very fortunate today to have three movers and shakers in the field of AI tertiary education with us today, and we're very, very appreciative of their time and insights. So today's session, we have Professor Adam Bridgeman. He's the Pro-Vice-Chancellor Educational Innovation at the University of Sydney and has led the university's work to provide professional development and collaborative support for teaching and learning activities across the university. He's played a pivotal role in guiding the university through the disruption of the pandemic, overseeing the development of training, resources and tools to support best practice in the transition from face-to-face education to online and hybrid modes, and has led the university's approach to generative AI. We also have Professor Michael Sankey joining us today. Michael's the Director of Learning Futures and Lead Education Architect at Charles Darwin University. He specialises in technology-enhanced learning, staff and leadership development, curriculum renewal, online pedagogies, multimodal design, digital, visual and multiliteracies. He's worked in higher education for 30 plus years and is particularly interested in how constructively aligned and aesthetically enhanced learning environments can better transmit concepts to students, particularly those from diverse backgrounds. And we also have Professor Christine Bond joining us today as well on the panel. Christine is the Dean Learning Futures at Griffith University, which provides central learning and teaching support, as well as academic professional development. Prior to this role, Christine had held learning and teaching leadership roles in the Arts, Education and Law Group and the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice. So we are very excited to have this combination of people here today and can't wait to hear what they've got to say. Today, the format of the session will be a facilitated panel discussion for the first part of the session. Then we'll switch to a discussion of questions from attendees and then a summary and wrap up at the end. I'm moving quite quickly through this because I'd like to give us a lot of time to hear from the panelists. So we'll be looking at these four key questions in the facilitated panel discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a minute as we get into the questions, just so we can see our panelists a little bit more clearly. We can always put these questions in the chat as well, if that would help. Okay, so firstly, panelists, what approach is your institution taking to AI for educational purposes? And we can see we've got quite a few meaty questions coming up, so we might try and give maybe shorter answers to number one and then get into it for the rest. So what approach is your institution taking to AI for educational purposes? Might start with Adam.
Thanks, Kat. Careful adoption, that's where we're going. I think that's very briefly. We recognise this is a tool that our students will be using for 40 years or so after they graduate, and they're using it in their Saturday jobs now. We know it's not perfect, but we know that it's going to be so important for their employability. So careful adoption.
Lovely, thank you, Adam. Michael?
So we were at academic board this morning, and the position we took was that AI is kind of one of the ultimate productivity tools that we have at our disposal. And it's part of our responsibility as academics to make sure, and as a university, to make sure that our students are making the most of these tools, but doing it in a sensible way.
And Christine?
I suspect we're all saying the same thing, but just using slightly different language. And Griffith is the same. We're recognising that this is a skill that our students will need to master, and increasingly so as we move through the years. And so it's not a matter of banning the use of artificial intelligence, but thinking about what it means for the digital literacy skills for our students and how we start to embed that in the curriculum, and what that might mean in terms of shaping future curriculum in terms of its knowledge and skill base. And the assurance of learning is still obviously an important aspect of this. And we'll know that because Tex is putting out a request for information around that point. So I don't want to downplay the issues around assurance of learning, but I do think that it has a larger scope than just assessment.
Yes, excellent. Okay, I think we'll move on to question 2 then. So these are big questions, so we'll see how it goes. So what do you see are the key challenges facing educators in higher education? And specifically, how have you seen assessment policy and design shift in response to generative AI? Michael, did you want to start with this one?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll start with the last part first around policy. Now, policy is reasonably easy to change. It's getting the buy-in from faculties and academics in relation to, one, the need for that change and the depth of that change. But the policy itself, we've made changes in our policy and iteratively made changes in our policy as we've understood it more and more. The biggest challenge, though, is about bringing our academics up to speed in the use of these tools. And so it's not just the use of ChatGPT or any other, and not one of it's. There are hundreds of tools that they can use depending on the discipline they're in, and increasingly the tools are becoming much more multimodal as well. So it's not just the fact of teaching them and helping them understand the fact that they can put a prompt into a generative AI engine, but also what else can be generated through that activity. And so it could be voice, it could be video, it could be images that are all produced by the different generative AI engines and the way in which they can use them in concert. So it's understanding that this is also going to evolve and get deeper and deeper as these tools become more multimodal. And so it's then understanding, okay, well, we've got policy that's fit for purpose now, but even as this has come on us so quickly, we need to be agile enough to be able to change and adapt our policy as this continues to grow.
And do you think, you mentioned the multimodal nature of these generative AI tools, is this in itself having an impact on assessment design?
Oh, absolutely. So originally when ChatGPT came out, we said, oh, okay, well, we've got to use a lot of Vivas and we've got to use a lot of images and we've got to use getting students to think not just in terms of text, the technology has evolved to the point where it's doing those things for us now already. So it's moved and it's morphed as it will. And so it's not just about changing assessment. Changing assessment's fine, but it's actually about how we're engaging our students to use these tools as a base level of productivity. And so being able to work with the information that's out there, but to then treat them as not just empty vessels waiting to be filled, but actually with the potential to actually create and to take on, to establish new ways of thinking around the knowledge that they do have access to. So it changes the assessment in that it becomes far more forward focused rather than looking back at the past and trying to regurgitate what's happened before.
Thank you. Christine, did you want to add to that?
I find my mic button. I think the key challenge for educators is capacity building. We have a lot of staff who perhaps feel uncomfortable and the technology moves so quickly. So there is a piece here about staff capacity building as much as it is about teaching our students the kinds of skills as well. So there's three pieces, in my head, there's three pieces to this puzzle. One is the curriculum piece about the skills for students and how we build that into our curriculum, how we respond agilely enough, or we're future-proofing our curriculum enough. The second one is that industries are in different places with their use of generative AI and you know, Darwin and all the DALL-E and all the other kinds of image-based ones. So some industries are further along this, and when you're thinking about what we're teaching students in their skill base, some industries are more receptive to it than others. So there's a piece there about that intersection when we talk about employability, the intersection with industry, and what role educators can actually what universities can do in terms of those relationships and working with industry. And then the last one, obviously, is the assessment and the capacity building around assessment. Our first responses were primarily around, I think, securing assessment. I think we've got a lot more mature approach as we've moved along from the original rush in December, January, and in 2023. And we're starting to think about create more creative and innovative ways that start to replicate the kinds of skills we think students will be using in industry. There's still an importance of securing some assessment. I mean, that's been quite clear from TEXA if you read their age and assessment in the age of AI. But I think the push now is to actually start thinking about the ways in which we can, and I think Michael said it very well, kind of what's the future focus, what's the future skill here we need to scaffold into our assessment processes.
Thank you, Christine. And you can see it is, of course, a very complex issue because as educators, we're responding to the evolving tools, but we're also in preparing our students for the world of work, responding to the evolving needs and uses of industry as well. So in a sense, we're kind of not caught in the middle, but there's a lot of different things to consider and pulling at educators in that way.
Yeah, so we often talk, I mean, we've talked a lot about we need to prepare our students to continue to learn and build in them the skills to be able to do this kind of lifelong learning approach. And I think generative AI and all the other image and voice tools and things make that even more important, that we prepare our students with that base of how to continue that learning process once they leave the university. And that becomes even more critical, I think.
Yeah. Can I just add that PwC, our very good friends, PwC, and particularly the government's best friend at the moment, PwC say that about 73% of industry are using AI in some form or other. My simplistic view would be that, okay, if 73% of industry are doing it, maybe 73% of our courses should be using it as well. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Adam, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm probably agreeing with everything that's just been said. I think Michael said it very well. What we're tending to assess at the moment is the base level knowledge. And so we have cheap and cheerful, we have pile them high, multiple choice questions online. And so it's both a challenge to shift for me 5,000 academics, 4,000 units of study to do something different. But it's also an opportunity because we have been assessing the wrong things. We've been assessing 19th century skills probably, rather than 20th century would be nice. 21st century might be better. So so it is a challenge, and it is probably assessment is the biggest challenge. We have our response to TEXA is lane 1, lane 2. So we have assurance of learning in lane 1. And learning for assessment for learning, and that includes using AI well, as we've said, is important in our lane 2. And the challenge for that is that lane 1 has got to be thought about at the program level. So we have, as I said, 5,000 units of study running at the moment. Every single one of them thinks that they might have to secure all of their assessments. We need to think at the program level. We need to think, what does our graduates need? What does a first-year student need when they get to the end of their first year? What does a chemistry major need when they get to the end of their major? Let's secure those things and have some fun with the lane 2 that everybody can do. So both challenges. One more challenge, as Michael said, lots of tools. That means it's very, very expensive, because every discipline probably will need its own specialized tool. So it's a heyday for the ed tech companies.
And Adam, when you mean every different discipline will need its own tool, do you mean own generative AI tool specifically for the discipline need?
Yeah, look, we've got architecture wanting one tool, we've got medicine wanting a different tool, law needs a different tool again. They all have their own databases that they're feeding from, and so $25 a student a month for all of those is going to be a different model for us.
Yeah, but they don't need to buy textbooks anymore, do they?
I think that raises a really important question about equity of access.
Yeah.
Because some students can afford to pay and some students can't. So it really is relying on what the university can provide within its learning and teaching environment. So it does really get to this issue of equity of access alongside the confidentiality and security stuff that we need to think through as well, as we want to embed more use of these tools in our curriculum.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, I will hand over to James for the second 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so we just wanted to shift a little bit to focus on the particular field that our SIG members are particularly interested in. So many of our SIG members work with international students on developing English language as well as academic literacies, and increasingly digital literacies as a key component of that. So I guess the question is, do you see policies regarding language proficiency or academic literacies changing and developing as Gen AI tools become more widely adopted? Have you seen any movements in that area specifically? Maybe Christine, if you'd like to have a shot at that.
Yeah, I was hoping you would not ask me to go first. I think this is a tough one, and I think it's a tough one because so much of the way we think about the threshold language is also linked to, I think, visa and other kinds of more complicated environments about getting into the country on student visas as well. It can't not impact it. It does raise the question, given a lot of these tools become language translators and start to become very good language translators, what it is that we're actually asking from students to be able to do and to reproduce in those contexts. Does the 22nd century mean we actually don't need to learn other languages? We all come in with personal translation devices generated by AI. So I think we need to rethink what it is we actually are asking for students to be able to show as they come in the country. What are the baseline skills, and are we actually expecting slightly different baseline skills than we might have in the past? I don't work in the area of the Griffith International or the entrance requirements, and in fact some people here like John might be more familiar with this work than I am. I at this stage haven't seen the policies that I've been aware of shifting at the moment, but that's not to say that they would not.
Got to say, I think it's a great opportunity for international students. We haven't made much change to international policies in relation to this yet. But what I really see is the opportunities around the multimodal use of these materials. So particularly for international students, and the way in which it can deconstruct knowledge and put it in simpler terms for them. So we love in academia to be complex and to give multi-factored questions to them, but this GPT and tools like that can really break down those, to break those concepts down. So I think the opportunities here are also in terms of the multimodality, the ability to deconstruct video. So you can put a video into an AI tool, it will give you a transcript. they can read the transcript while the person's speaking. It actually helps them pick up English and how to speak English. So there's a whole range of different tools in this. Now, of course, they've been able to do with transcripts and things like that as well from more traditional tools. But this takes it to a different level because it also summarizes and things like that.
So what you're talking here really is about the study support. We can actually potentially broaden out the nature of the study support
absolutely.
for international students in ways that are perhaps more personalized and to that particular student.
Adam, did you want to comment on that as well?
No, I think I'm thinking about our policies. I think the only one that we have really changed is the use of translation software in a written assignment, where I think we were banning it, and now we're moving to acknowledge it. So we're happy with people to use it; they just acknowledge it. Ultimately, I think where we're going is we want students to know that they're responsible for whatever it is whatever tools that they use. Ultimately, if they're in the workplace, they are responsible for whatever it is their boss asks them to do, and so they're responsible. If they've used translation tools in the process, we know these things aren't perfect, so they know they need to know when to correct it. I haven't really thought about our international sort of IELTS approach in the future, but I think there might be elements of our lane one where we have to secure that somehow, and we might have to think about how that's done, because we know that you can have real-time translation in a Zoom setting. And I think it's, as Christian said, this is a wonderful, both Michael and Christian said, it's particularly for international students, the setting up, developing agents that can really work with them 24 hours a day, and they can be asking questions and improving their English whilst improving their disciplinary understanding. This is something that we cannot provide at the scale of 84,000 individuals, but it's a massive opportunity. And I would think for students with language issues and international students, this is a game changer in what they will get out of their courses.
Yeah, I think the other advantage we have, of course, with international students is their visa requirements to be in class. And so it's not the same as dealing with distance education students who might never come on campus. We have got a cohort of students who are going to be there for a given amount of time a week, and we have the opportunity to work through these things with them and to actually train them up in the use of these tools in a more appropriate ways. So I think that's an advantage we have in terms of international students particularly.
Yeah. Okay, I think as far as the future goes, and I think this might be sort of the next question, so apologies. I think for the nerds in the audience, I think Star Trek predicted the universal translator in the 22nd century. I think we're going to beat that. I think the TARDIS had a translation circuit. So I think that's a reality. Douglas Adams' Babelfish, I think that's it. We're a few years off. We're not that far off it. You could almost have it in my glasses. You could be having that real-time translation. I don't think we're that far off that. And so the need to be able to converse in another language is different. You have some threshold skills, and you need to be able to understand the nuances of what people are saying. But the actual translation bit, which is like the threshold bit, is kind of changed, I think. Similarly with writing, it's now in Office. You can pay $150 a year, and you can have you can have ChatGPT 4 in Office, and it will start writing with you for you. So it's actually here, and it just changes the name of what it means to why we need to ask students to write English or speak English. So, it's different.
Yeah. So Adam, what's the sign say on the door of the restaurant at the end of the universe?
Don't panic.
Don't panic. That's it. There you go.
Can I be a bit naughty and ask an extra question? So in terms of language proficiency, at what point do students actually need enough language, though, to be able to critically evaluate the output of these tools? Because we were talking about they need to be responsible for what they submit to their employer, etc., or as an assessment, etc. But if they don't have the base of A level in order to evaluate it and see if it's wrong or right, or the nuances are wrong, then that's where they may be tripped up. What do you think about that?
So what's the difference between that and a textbook? I mean, a textbook is mostly a person's opinion, you know, that might be based in some scholarly other scholarly literature if you're lucky, or research, but it's no different. What's the difference? I mean, you know, these tools, what we can do with these tools, though, can take it to the next level in terms of helping them deconstruct ideas, because that's one of the things it really does well.
Yeah, I think it. You know, I'm a scientist, so the analogy I'm going to use is the calculator. When I was at school, calculators were coming in. I needed to know how to do long multiplication. It's something that you need to know the process of, but there's no point in setting me 20 questions to do at home and expect me to do them without a calculator. It's just, you need to have some baseline skills, and you need to know when the answer looks wrong. And that's somewhat easier than language, because it's just numbers, but language is much more complicated in a way. So you do need those threshold skills. You do need that ability. But let's do it whilst using the tools to do the tedious stuff, right? The tedious stuff, and we can make this much more fun.
Absolutely.
So that's the point that applies to, I think, all our knowledge and skill bases. It's the same thing. It's just more complicated with language, is that what we actually think students need to know now might actually be quite different, because you know, these tools take care of all that tedium stuff. So yes, they need to understand the process, but they actually don't necessarily need to be able to replicate the process by hand. And we already teach statistics to social science students using those kinds of methods anyway. Rather than make them do the mathematics, we give them a kind of an understanding of the process, not in mathematical terms, but in logic terms. And then the software on the computer does all the calculations, you know, the mathematical calculations. So we're already doing that in some areas to broaden out the ability of students to access knowledge. So this has an opportunity to broaden out access to knowledges that students otherwise may not have felt comfortable or able to access. So there's a real opportunity here if we think it through, as opposed to panicking and, you know, locking the door. But I think that point applies. It's going to make us reevaluate what is actually essential knowledge and skills that we need from our students, and we need to assess from our students.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Kat, that you made about, I guess, helping students to understand, you know, when to question the output and to, you know, use that critical thinking. I mean, I've certainly noticed in just anecdotally in classes that students tend to see the outputs from, you know, Microsoft Word spell checker and things as and grammar checkers as you know, as right more of the time than themselves, if they don't have that confidence in their language ability. So I think that maybe that's the difference here, in that, you know, as we can see, Gen AI can be really confidently wrong. And so I guess empowering and supporting our students to be confident in their own critical thinking and to question the tools, I guess, is important. So Adam has already kind of segued us into the final question, which is about the future. And so apart from the Babelfish coming to us very soon, obviously this is, you know, looking into a crystal ball and asking a silly question, really, in that AI is developing so rapidly. But I guess having a go, what do you think in the next 6 to 12 months do you see as some of the new major disruptions coming with AI? What kinds of developments do you think are going to particularly impact the higher ed sector in the next little while?
Well, I think one of the fundamental things is that it's not the growth of that. I will comment on that in a sec. One of the fundamental things we need to do is actually give our staff the ability to use this themselves, and the ability to use the ChatGPT-4 and things like that, whether it be through Copilot or whether it be through something else. That we have a Charles Darwin University, I mean, it would cost us $3 million to just give our staff access to that tool. Now, we haven't got $3 million just lying around waiting to be spent on ChatGPT-4 or Copilot, not this year at least. So, you know, there are some fundamental issues around equity for staff here as well. If we expect our academic staff to be in front of the game, we've got to give them the tools to keep in front of the game. We can't expect them to be playing catch up with our students. We know that many students are going are learning this stuff in primary and even in primary school, but in secondary school as they come towards university. But our staff haven't had that opportunity at all. And so I have a big task on my plate to make sure that our staff, as many of our staff as possible, can understand, have AI fluency, not just literacy, in relation to what can be done with the tools and how they can evolve. So in terms of the evolution, I see them becoming far more multimodal. So I see ChatGPT, as Gemini now does, I see ChatGPT 4, etc., starting to produce not just text responses, but audio responses and visual responses, and being able to put together presentations by prompting. And so we can do that in Gemini now. We can do it in a couple of other tools. I see this actually becoming the norm across most tools.
I think for us, the game changer is almost actually days away at Sydney, because we will be getting Microsoft Copilot for web. And I think, as I understand it, anybody that's a Microsoft customer, any university that's a Microsoft customer, that's true. And also for students. So we provide students as part of their tuition fees that they get a Microsoft Office. This isn't the integrated into Office version, it's the web version. But when we're at the point of having ChatGPT 4 and DALL-E available, it's something that we give to students in their productivity suite. We cannot ignore this. And although we've got some good policies and we've got some good approaches and we're going to say nice things to TechSer, frankly, we've got 700,000 essays submitted every year, and every single one of them could be done by these tools. So we have a long way to go in a very short, it will seem like a very short amount of time. So I think that's, and I've just been spending the afternoon talking to some staff about this change, and they are now, oh, this is actually real. And the difference between 3.5 and 4 in terms of making stuff up is huge. Michael, I don't know when 5's coming out, do you? But it will be.
No.
We think it's
won't be too far away. That's right.
It won't be too far away. And the difference between 3.5 and 4, and the difference between what they're saying 5 will be able to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why my Babelfish prediction was closer than we think. But for us, that's the game changer, because we cannot ignore this. And I get staff telling me, I'm bored of AI. You keep talking about it, but the sky hasn't fallen in. Well, 75% of students at least are using it in many of their assessments.
Yep.
Christine, did you want to comment on some any other disruptions you see coming in the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm going to say I don't work it. I mean, my disciplinary home is not artificial intelligence and coding and programming. So it would be like guessing, like rolling a dice for me to guess what the future holds in terms of artificial intelligence. What we do know is that it will change very quickly. It probably then will plateau for a little while and then change really quickly again. So I suspect we've got several kinds of iterations or evolutions of what generative AI or AI image generation stuff will do. We'll see changes quite quickly, which for us will feel somewhat overwhelming, I think, at times for people. But I think if we think quite clearly about what are the skills and knowledges, it's sort of like, you know, lectures evolved because there wasn't the printed book. So the only way to communicate knowledge was to speak it and to give a lecture. So now that we have, you know, Google and, you know, databases in front of us, how do we handle knowledge now? What do we need to teach students about knowledge? You know, recall is necessary? It depends. Maybe if you're a paramedic and I'm lying bleeding out in the middle of the road from an accident, I want my paramedic to know where my veins are without having to Google it. But in many disciplines, you know, what we actually want is the critical thinking. We want the kind of communication skills, and they're things we can still teach students, but we teach students from a baseline of what, you know, of those generative AI tools and those image-based tools. So I can't predict the future, but I am expecting that we will see really rapid jumps very quickly, and then a plateau as the technology and the capacity, the computing capacity shifts, or the way the computers work shifts. I believe there's kind of some shifting in the ways in which quantum computing may be available and at what level it's available, and that changes things as well. So I'm not a scientist in that sense, so it's a bit hard for me to see what it looks like. But it's, for me, I feel it's like my phone. I can do so much on my phone now, and I don't need a code. When I think about when I first started at school, we were sitting down between little apples, typing in, I don't know, Apple code is the only way to get the computer to run. Well, I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to understand coding to get the computer to run anymore. And so this is essentially what we're seeing. But the fundamentals of critical thinking, the fundamentals of evaluation, the fundamentals of thinking what data I need, all those things haven't shifted. Those are still basic skills that we need from us and from our students.
But please get rid of Otter.
And look, if we don't get this right, if our students can't use these tools well, if we send students out who can't speak English and communicate, our reputation in the community is gone, and that's all we have as institutions. But also, we've seen the future. We've all seen Terminator. We know what happens if we get this wrong. Our students are the ones that are going to have to be leaders in this field and be responsible and be ethical, because it's quite possible that you could go down that dangerous route. There's some nasty people in the world after all, and these tools combined with the kind of computing power that Christian's just talked about, I can't remember what it was called in Terminator. It wasn't Sky something. The sky's the limit. I couldn't do the pun because I couldn't remember what it was called.
Skynet.
Skynet's the limit. Skynet's the limit. There you are. Badly delivered pun.
I mentioned earlier that I think I mentioned earlier that I had to do a presentation this morning to academic board on AI and where we're going with it and policies and things like that. And one very stoic academic said, "We don't want to move too quickly. We don't want to tip the balance." And I was able to assure them it's far too late for that. We've already tipped the balance, and it's tipped in one way. We actually need to be able to give our staff the tools and the abilities to be able to tip the balance back in our favour. So, yeah.
John, I'll hand over to you. I can see a few questions coming through in the Q&A, and encourage anyone who would like to keep adding into the Q&A there.
Yeah, thank you, James. Yeah, there are a fair few questions. As I look at them, I think several of them kind of fall within the same sort of family. And so I might kind of just quickly try and summarize those. There's questions about the importance of obtaining a base level of English. Questions about, are students actually learning if they're just using these tools to translate from their language to English? Questions about the importance of learning language, and does do these tools do value language in communication in some way? And so I guess maybe I think what a lot of these questions are trying to get at is, if Adam's Babelfish kind of comes to fruition, like true fruition, are we going to lose something in terms of not requiring our students to achieve a level of proficiency in a language? And in our case, it's English, but for Australian students going abroad, it'd be the languages of the countries where they're studying. Are we potentially not, overutilizing these tools and giving something up in turn?
Or are we overthinking it? So, I mean, I've got these earbuds in here. And if you were speaking to me in another language, these earbuds could be speaking to me in my mother tongue. And I could be hearing you in my own language. There are so many things that we haven't got there quite yet. We know how to do it. We've got the translation softwares. We haven't got the little bit of kit that stick in our ear yet, though that's not going to be far away. So, what is really important here? It's actually be able to get and the alternative to that is, okay, I'm going to speak my language and it's going to come out in English. So what is more important? The more important thing is that we're actually understanding the concepts here, and we can actually take that base level and build to make ourselves, or make society, make humanity more productive. And I think we don't necessarily just want to focus on this notion of language, because language is becoming much more universal, much more utilitarian in many senses.
Okay, thank you. Christine, I look like you have something to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite complicated, because on one hand, what learning a language does is at the same time you learn something about culture of the place, of the language we come from. And ultimately, fundamentally, that's what language does. By speaking it in that tongue, you're in some ways starting to get a feel for their different perspectives. Not completely, but you start to see the culture. So the question is what do we actually want people to learn from language? There's the direct literal communication stuff, which obviously the increasing software can do that. It allows us to allows people to broaden access to knowledge, and it also allows people to communicate and more opportunities. If it is more about cultural understanding and understanding those nuances, what is it then, the skill that we're teaching students, and how and what are we transitioning it through? So it all comes back, I think, to what are the learning outcomes and the skills that we want people to do. So there might still be value in learning a language, but it might be for different kinds of purposes and not something that necessarily all students, well, not all students do it anyway. The fewer students learn other languages than ever before, particularly if you're English speakers, because the world is becoming almost an English speaking as the universal language. But it's thinking about those skills and the skills that that language might be able to give you in that context that I think provides a place for languages, even with translation devices and Babelfish or whatever else that emerges, because there's still that nuance that you only get from actually understanding more about the culture. And history does it too, and there's some other disciplines. Sorry, Adam.
No, I was agreeing. I think you added something to my thoughts then, and I think it's that there's another couple of dangers that we do have the bland. Everything becomes more bland in a way, so the cultural stuff is kind of lost. As you said, everybody starts speaking English, or it doesn't matter in Michael's, because it's being translated. So we've got that cultural side that would be great if we could focus on and actually celebrate different cultures rather than make everybody North Americans. But also I think there's a danger that going back to sort of assessments, our assessments are fairly structured, that we want the answer. We want the students to give us the answer in a particular way. And I was just thinking, when one of my colleagues uses AI a lot, and I can tell in his writing, Kat, you know who I'm talking about, I can tell in his writing that it's shaped the way he's writing. He's lost his way that he used to express things, and now everything just sounds a bit bland. And I worry about, where's the next James Joyce going to come from? If it can do really good poems, right, and if it's going to suggest the rhyme for you, there's a temptation, and it's just going to be there's a thing about language and culture that we just need to make sure we keep as humans, and make sure that we actually put that into our learning and into our assessments, and celebrate culture and celebrate creativity, and forget about the boring stuff, the tedious stuff that can be done. So the mathematical equations, as Parina puts in the question, the mathematical equations are the boring bit. The exciting bit is what you can do with them, how you can model the atmospheric conditions using mathematical equations. That's the fun bit, and that's where the humans know what the questions to ask, and get the machines to do the boring bit of crunching through the calculus.
Yeah,
it's about having voice, and you're right, with using things like ChatGPT, you don't get the voice of individual writers. And it will be interesting to see whether or not, because people thought it would be the death of the novel, we won't need novels anymore because ChatGPT, but you won't get that voice. And I think as humans, we see and we hear the voice, and when we don't get it, we think it's bland, it's uninteresting. So I do wonder if you still will find writers, because that's the only way you're going to get that kind of voice. And you notice it sometimes. I'm sure if you buy some random book or free book off Amazon, you kind of go, oh, I wonder if that was written by ChatGPT, because it doesn't feel right, doesn't sound right. There's just something missing. Sorry, Michael.
No, not at all. My undergraduate degree was in photography, and of course, photography and visual arts. And over the time, I initially worked as a photographer, and then digital photography came in. And of course, I'd spent hours and hours and hours in the darkroom, hadn't I? Kind of with my hands in the chemicals and producing prints and things like that. And all of a sudden, that went. Everybody went to digital, and then all of a sudden it was coming out of printer, and everything became digitally manipulated. Then all of a sudden, people started to get an interest again in the arts, and you start to see film coming back, and you start to see paper come back, and you start to see chemicals come back. And now, I mean, you see the same with music, don't you? With the rise back of vinyl records. I mean, we're not going to lose that. We always have this thing that there's this nostalgic thing we want to hold on to, because we are humans, and that's what makes us humans. And so I don't think, yes, it might even out language somewhat. But we always have this, we are creative beings, and we need to be creative beings, and we'll find ways to be creative.
Okay. Yeah, I think that discussion addressed a number of the questions that have come up. There was one that at the very beginning, I thought I'd come back to it. I think it's kind of an interesting perspective, considering how much we've talked about the need to invest, how much, we've got to start working now. But someone does ask, what if it all turns out to be a dud? What if this is as far as it goes? It was great, but it's a bit more of a flash in the pan when it's not going to go anywhere. There are, potential lawsuits, there are liabilities, the funding could dry up. Certainly GPT is going through a few issues. Copilot has quite a bit of censorship in it that I've come across, where they just say, oh, no, I'm not going to address that question, move on to the next one. And so what if it doesn't really progress any further, and where are we at with things then?
I actually think I'm sorry.
No, go.
I actually think that being forced to look at what should be the knowledge and skills for our students, regardless of whether or not ChatGPT ends up being able to do what we think it might end up being able to do, has been really useful and important, and making us rethink assessment, because I think Adam said it, we are assessing in 19th century ways. We're still doing exams, we're still doing basically essays, narrative essays. So I actually think that no matter whether or not it's now plateauing and doesn't get any further, all those lessons and learnings around assessment, we don't drop them. They're still really important ways of thinking about what we want our students to be able to do and to be able to show. And I think thinking about how much do I really need recall questions? And that's nothing to do actually with ChatGPT, because I can go into Google now and Google and get information. It's about evaluating the information I get, regardless of whether it comes out of ChatGPT or Google or anything else. So I think forcing us to kind of think what those skills really are and how important certain skill and the changing nature of the 21st century skill base. I think I don't think we've lost anything if ChatGPT and generative AI and things don't go any further than they do at the moment.
Michael or Adam, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. I think it's already powerful enough that it's going to make a difference, even if it's stopped at where it is, and iron out some of the still little quirks. There's some. I mean, the federal government and in New South Wales, our state government, we've been to panels representing education to them. They are thinking about some of the issues that Alex brings up. I know that in Europe, they tend to be a bit. They've got the buying power to be a little bit more heavy-handed with the vendors. They are putting in restrictions, so we do need to think about the guardrails that we need as a society to prevent the Skynet kind of situation. But on the other hand, the Australian government knows it's a massive productivity gain, and if we can't stand still, Michael said 75% of industry are using it, so we cannot ignore it. I don't think this one is going to stop. I think this one is computing power, Christine mentioned, going to go up more and more. And there's no sign that this one is going to stall. And I think we have to take this one seriously. And even if it did, I think Christine made a brilliant point, even if it did, if it just made us refocus on what's actually important, and then actually our education would have improved.
Yeah. It makes, in academic board today, I'd given my presentation, I've talked about equity issues in relation to this and students not having access to these tools where others would. So others will pay for them. Others won't be able to pay for them because they haven't got enough money. And all of a sudden we've got an equity issue because some students can do better in a subject because they have access to it. So there's some equity issues there. But his question was to me, what are we going to do about this? And I think, and my response was, well, maybe we need to think differently about that. Maybe there are places and times that this is not that important. So I've been doing a report for UNESCO on what's happening in the South Pacific in relation to access to technologies and quality delivery and things like that. And I was speaking to the person from the Ministry of Education in Nauru. And I said, well, what are you doing about using technologies to help your students learn? And she looked at me and said, we don't have to worry about that. We don't need technologies. We teach them face to face. What do I need a computer for? We're training people to do trades, or be plumbers or electricians, because that's what the mine needs in the middle of the that mine in the middle of the ocean, which gives us all our phosphate. They didn't see the need to actually upskill themselves in all this stuff, and maybe they don't, and maybe some of our other people don't too. So what it's doing is it's actually helping us understand what are some human things that we need to hold on to, and what is important here. Well, yeah, sure, this is going to help business. It's going to help business become more productive. And for those people who want to become more productive, it will help them. But there will be people who don't need to become more productive, who are quite happy being human and not having to fart around with these tools. So, let's allow them to be it. And let's not put our perspectives on top of them, as we've done so many times as white people in this country and around the world.
Thank you. So just the last question. The audience today, we are language and learning practitioners. We're working mostly with international students, but also with domestic students, particularly on their academic language development, their academic skills. For you three, who are very much more plugged into the strategic aims and the policies that are being developed at your universities, what are your recommendations to us who are working with students in the here and now? We're looking at what they need, what we need to provide to our students in the immediate and future, in the short term. What would be your recommendations?
I think one of the things that's happening sporadically at the University of Sydney is actually conversations in the classroom between the teachers and the students about this. As I said, it's 80% of the students at least are using it. Some of them are scared that they think they're going to get caught for something. Some of them are worried that they're not going to develop core skills. So I think having a conversation is the easiest thing, because the students know a lot more about it than we do, or they think they do anyway. They think they do, and what you get out of AI is exactly proportional to the quality of the questions that you ask it. And so actually having those conversations with students and giving them examples of where it does things badly and where it does things well, and actually just having a grown-up conversation with grown-ups about it is the best and first thing to do, because if it's a secret, then it becomes an integrity issue, and it can't stay as an integrity issue. It's got to become part of almost every course.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're spot on there. Let's treat them as partners in this journey, as students as partners. We also need, fundamentally, I would suggest you get your hands on these tools yourself and start using them, understand them, get into there, get even if you have to pay for a ChatGPT-4 license yourself, get in there and start using it and understand what it can do to help you as a teacher, and to then have that conversation with the students, because then you're going to be on the same level as the students, because a lot of them are already using it. So, but you need to be there. You need to understand the tool, just like you need to understand other things about language learning. You need to understand this tool, which is going to help you in language learning.
Christine, do you have anything to add?
Probably not. What I would say is the bit that I think we focus so much on the integrity assessment and kind of skills level that I think we probably haven't given as much thought to how it may help staff, and may help staff in terms of development of curriculum, in terms of the delivery of resources to students. Again, it comes with all the caveats around confidentiality, security, and you've got to evaluate what comes out. but you know, we have some course conveners who've taken it and I want to do check-in quizzes every week, but developing enough questions for check-in quizzes every week was killing me. Well, now I can go to ChatGPT, feed the resources in, and they're publicly available resources anyway, so I'm fine in the security issue. And all of a sudden I've generated banks and banks of questions that students can use as part of their learning journey. So I think one of the best advice is it's not just about the things we've talked about securing assessment and assessment for learning and then what the skills are, but it's also about how both students and staff can use it to actually support a more productive learning relationship. And that comes from conversations in the classroom. It comes from students being aware of how they can use it and what the pitfalls are. And it comes from building staff capacity and being comfortable in using these tools. And I don't know if we've done enough for staff comfort in terms of using the skills, and quite enough for, around making students certain about where and when they can't. We've put it in policies, we put it in kind of the learning resources, but there seems to be a lot of uncertain students about whether or not they can reveal what use they've done and how they've used it, despite all the stuff we've been putting out into the, you know, in orientations and all this sort of stuff. We recently did a survey of some students, and it was still quite clear that they still felt a little uncomfortable about using it, despite all the communications from the university. So I think they're probably two areas that we can work on, regardless of the other issues.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I think that takes us right about up to time. Kat?
Okay, so we're going to thank Michael, Christine, and Adam for coming along today. I have taken so many notes of everything you've said, but in a nutshell, listen, for me, the most exciting things were references to Douglas Adams, the TARDIS, and Terminator. But what I am learning from this is that we need to shift as language educators to be having conversations with our students so that they understand the ways that they can use the tools that are available to them to maximize their learning. So for us in the front lines, that's where we need to be supporting our learners through this, because I really hear you that they are unsure of themselves. And I really like the point that if it's a secret, that's when it becomes an academic integrity issue as well. And equity problems and focusing on assessment for learning, these are things that we're all grappling with. These are the messages that came through really clearly to me. We can't ban these things, we need to be using them. So once again, I would like to thank our panel. We really appreciate you giving us your time. You're very busy people. This session has been recorded, so it will be available for people to watch later. And thank you all very much.
Thanks for having us.